Hi, this is Eric Dunn from Wrike, and I have the pleasure of being here with Dan Rome. Dan, you are the best-selling author of 4 books now. Can we see them? I mean, it's the back of the napkin. We have Blah, Blah, Blah. We have Show and Tell, and Unfolding the Napkin, which is a follow-up to your first book, which has been, I mean, it's been named, Best Innovation Book of the Year, Best Business Book of the Year by Fast Company and Business Week. Can you, and I know that you're also doing consulting for companies like Google, Microsoft, eBay, Walmart. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and what you actually teach to teams?
Sure, Eric. Well, I'm one of those people that when I was a kid, I drew a lot, which isn't unusual because most kids draw a lot. And then when I went through university, I continued to draw, which is also kind of unusual at that point because most people going through university kind of give up that childlike drawing. But I kept doing it. And then after a number of years, I found myself in management consulting, primarily in the technology industry, technology space. And I was the guy who, the moment the meeting started, would run up to the flip chart or the whiteboard and start drawing those circles and boxes. And the fact that I drew made me kind of weird, but it also was very, very powerful because it was doing that I realized that, look, we can act it out right now. I mean, if you and I are talking about something, and I say, Eric, you're talking about this thing over here, and I'm talking about this thing over here, and what we're really trying to do is come to some sort of connection in the middle. This is what we're trying to make happen, but the problem is you keep going off that way, or there's a wall. The moment you do that kind of act, and as simple as that, as quick as that, this sort of visual mapping of what you're seeing in your mind, it really dynamically changes the way the meeting is going and how people interact. And long story short, Eric, what I finally did is I wrote a book about how I did this. And in the act of writing that book, it required me to kind of go back. In undergraduate in school, I did a strange major when I was at the university. I studied biology because I thought I wanted to be a doctor. And I also got a second degree in painting, in fine art, because again, I just really liked the drawing part. And so it was the combination of those, a little bit of the science and a little bit of what we'll call the creativity, the art side. They're very similar, actually. We often think we have our very analytical, kind of scientific mind and our very creative, artistic, crazy mind. In fact, there is so much overlap, and it comes out when we do this. The neurobiology of why drawing, why turning ideas into simple pictures, the neurobiological arguments are very compelling as to why we might want to do that, and we'll talk about more.
Now that you mentioned neurobiology, and I know you're constantly reading things about research for your books on psychology, visualization, techniques of work, and so on. Of all the things that you're reading, what do you envision for the future? How is this learning and all the things that we're learning ourselves as a community? How do you see work evolving in the future?
Well, gosh, it's so funny, isn't it? Because let's just take the same drawing we were working on, and let's just say that this literally is you. So let's have Eric over here. This is going to be Eric, and this is going to be Dan over here.
Good looking picture.
Yeah, really good, right? That's exactly what you look like. Well, here we have to, do some of this. There we have Eric, and here's Dan over here. So the point is, we think about work, and we've got all this technology behind us. We've got all these databases, and we've got all these computers, and we've got all of this incredible apps and software and networks and the cloud and all of that stuff. For years now, we've been saying eventually work's going to completely shift, and the need for this person to communicate with this person directly is going to go away because we'll be able to do so much more through technology. To a certain degree, that is true. However, I will also tell you that what I've found in literally traveling the world over these last few years to deliver my message is that as important as a technological infrastructure is to enable us to work remotely, I still believe that there's a tremendous amount of the future of work that will be face-to-face. There's an extraordinary amount that can be enabled, through some of the tools like your company is creating and many other things that enable bigger teams that are very distributed around the world to share in this type of communication. And so I think there are kind of 3 things that are going to play out. Number 1, I think that we will find that there's actually going to be more meetings rather than less. And I think many people in business are finding this to be true, and it's not necessarily a good thing. The reason why, and let's actually make some noise here. I think part of the reason why is that the problems that we're working on are just getting bigger and bigger and more complicated. And if in the past it might have been possible for the two of us to just be, talking back and forth and somehow solving this, that would have been possible if it was this big. But now it's this big. So our teams are getting much bigger. The need to be able to share this information with all of these people in some sort of meaningful way is really where things are getting complicated. And I think that's where the technologies that are emerging are really going to help us a lot. So whatever this is in this black box down here, whatever this black box can do to make sure that all of these people are in fact working, on the same problem, and do they all have the same vision of what the problem is, and do they all kind of know what their role is? To the degree that this can support them in doing that, that's going to be incredible.
Dan, talking about problems, I'm sure as a consultant, you've been finding recurring themes of the sort of problems that you're solving with different companies. I mean,
Yes.
every company loves to think that they have unique problems and they're special in the sort of problems that they have. But I'm sure you find recurring themes. What are the most common ones that you find, and how do you help teams solve them?
At the top level, Aaron, I mean, the real question is one that just comes right from here in the beginning. Because we are in an information overloaded state, and that is only going to continue to go on. I mean, think about this in the past. When someone was working on a project or trying to solve a problem, the biggest problem they had, probably one of the largest, was not having enough information about what the problem was. Is that the truth today? No. Now, the moment I look at whatever that problem is, the first thing I've got to deal with is probably too much information. Eternally, what I'm hearing, Dan, can you help us parse through this almost infinite and growing amount of data, information, knowledge about the thing that we're trying to work on, and pull out of there, what are the pieces that are really, really critical? What are the things that we really need to be paying attention to? Visuals can help us do this. This is kind of problem number one. How do we deal with an information overloaded situation right from the beginning? And on a weird little side note, Eric, I want to add this in. One of the reasons that I became very fascinated with the power of the visual mind is if you think about, I mean, literally, let's kind of sketch it out. If this is the human brain, and we've got sort of the brainstem here, and the reptilian brain, and then kind of the limbic brain and the neocortex around that. So let's say this is a human here. Not a very pretty one, but let's say this is a human.
Could be.
Could be, and here's our eye. So if we think about the incredible problem processing horsepower that is enabled through our brain just through the sense of vision, what's happened is the visual engine has evolved over millions and millions of years to do a really good job at looking at an overwhelming amount of inputs. And the inputs for vision are just photons. It's light. It's electrical information in the form of light. An almost infinite amount in front of us. Can we get all of this information in here and make sense of it? We can't. It's too much. So what's really cool about looking at the underlying sort of mechanisms of vision is how has this system developed to literally look at a world with an overwhelming amount of inputs, similar to the one we face in business problem solving, and do the best job it can at pulling out the pieces that are most important and then stitching them together in here into a story that most of the time is mostly correct or correct enough for us to move on to the next thing. Vision's not perfect, but it's doing a really good job. And this is what's fascinating about visual thinking. If we go in and look, what are the underlying processes by which vision does this magic trick of turning too much information into meaning? We can then kind of go and hijack this process and use it for when our team is facing an overwhelming problem. And we'll talk. I'd love to share with you a little bit more how that works.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I've observed also with the teams that we're working on is, and I think everybody can relate to this, the consequence of having these complex problems and so many people working on them, and how people can communicate and relate to each other, has caused so many time drains. When in the top three, let's say, causes that I've noticed are the amount of emails between each of these parties and one to another and then being copied and so on, email.
So let's, email, okay.
Number two is, you already mentioned it, the amount of meetings that people actually don't like.
Meeting.
And third solution that most people do, and it's also a time drain, is the amount of reporting, accumulating some sort of sense of information to show a status and so on. And people just spend a huge amount of time reporting on activities rather than actually doing valuable work. What would you suggest, to mitigate or to make the most efficient way of working with this sort of information?
Challenge one is so much email going back and forth, all the time. So many meetings, too many meetings. We've talked about that already, just an explosion of meetings, and then this incredible amount of reporting back that we've got to do. So all of these things, although intended to enable us to work more effectively, are so successful in doing that they end up overwhelming us. Yeah. We send more email, we have more meetings. So I have a thought on how visuals might actually help us in this. So one of the things I often recommend to people is when you're sending an email, go ahead and compose your thoughts in email as you normally would. And then what I often think about, I do this all the time, is it possible to create some kind of little image, just as simple as we're doing right here, really fast. And you know what, take your phone, your smartphone, your iPhone, your Android, whatever, snap a picture of it and attach it to the email. And that might sound crazy, but I want to actually show you an example of this is one that I have. I did a conversation the other day with a friend of mine who is a really powerful figure kind of in strategy around social media. Right. This was the artifact that was the outcome of our meeting. And the beauty of it is, I took a photo of it, emailed it back to her. Now we're looking at the same picture, and the next time we talk, it won't be based on an email that nobody wants to read, but it'll be based on this simple image, which then we can mark up.
It's a shared understanding.
Not going to do that, going to do that.
Right.
Exactly. So that takes care of email. Let's touch on meetings for a moment. Let's go through and see if we can. Meetings, I think, can be much more effective. Very simple. If meetings are coordinated and facilitated and enabled to be a little bit more like what we're doing right now, where we have a kind of a shared workspace, a piece of paper or a desktop tool or whatever it is, and I'm over here and I've got the pen and I'm saying, Eric, I'd like us to do this. And then as you've already done, perhaps you take it and say, no, we shouldn't be doing that, we should be doing this. Bingo. Right. And this, although it might feel in some cases like it could be a little unformed, it's a beautiful way if it's structured and facilitated to make sure that people really truly are seeing what the other person is talking about. So I very much encourage in meetings, a part of the meeting is set aside for structured whiteboarding. Structured whiteboarding.
It's a bit like prototyping your ideas and showing them to somebody else, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And rapid, in fact, like lean, rapid prototyping of that idea. Because here's my idea. Hey, Eric, what would you say if we made this a part of every meeting? There's my prototype. No more meetings unless we have structured whiteboarding in. That's my idea. What do you think?
I think it would greatly reduce the amount of meetings in the first place.
I think it might. And when we have them, they're certainly going to be more fruitful.
Yeah, meaningful meetings.
And then, to answer this third one about reporting, and this I think is where things get really interesting. Think about this. You and I have been communicating. We've got an idea. We're nailing it down using some pictures. We've had a meeting, and there's any number of people, and they could be remote. There's lots of tools that enable remote meetings, remote whiteboarding. They could be anywhere around the world. The beauty of it is now we've got this picture that we've created. When it comes time to report it back, here's what we drew, or here's what we drew. The picture is worth 1,000,000 words, especially when it comes time to reporting.
Excellent. Thank you for that beautiful summary. You also advocate that beyond solving problems and communicating among teams, pictures can be also used for selling ideas. And one of the first things that comes to my mind in terms of selling an idea is a typical startup pitch.
Oh yeah. Okay.
What advice could you give to somebody building up the pitch to perfect it with the help of drawings and pictures?
Can we switch one more piece of paper? And this one's, I actually have an in-depth answer for this, but we'll keep it at the top level. So if someone's trying to pitch, what are you trying to do? You're trying to sell. A pitch equals a sale. And we often are afraid of this word sale. We don't want to talk about selling because we're not salespeople. Well, guess what? We are. We are all salespeople, because if I've got my idea and I need to get it to you, I'm going to have to try to sell it to you. So I think what's really interesting is there's a nice storyline that I call it. It's something kind of like this that I call the pitch storyline. And what it goes, it starts over here. This is time moving across like this, and this is the beginning of our meeting. And there's me, and there's you, and I've got this particular idea that I want to share with you. So what I might do is represent that by drawing a little picture of a problem. So the first thing I do is I state here's where you and I are, but there's a problem. And that problem is actually pretty big. It's like a mountain range in front of us. Right. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to say, here's a picture of my problem, and here's a picture of what things are going to look like when we've solved it. Very high level. I like your idea of a rapid prototype, Right. What I'm going to do is as I'm going to get you from here over here is I'm going to say, Eric, imagine if we took this problem and we did something with it like this that would enable us to jump over this big, mountain range that's stopping us. This could be a technological limitation, a marketing problem, a financial problem, a user experience problem, a technical problem, anything. We've got to get past it. And what I do along the way is I draw a series of 3 or 4 little pictures that explain what's going on, how we might solve it, and if we were going to use this approach to solve it, what would that require? And these simple little pictures are actually, they go in a sequence of 1, 2, 3, 4. And for people who are interested, if you want to go through the back of the napkin book, it's actually a very structured approach that says with a very simple picture. You start out by drawing a little portrait that just shows, here's the people and here's the problem. And then we might draw a little chart over here that provides some sort of quantitative assessment of how many people, how big is the problem, what would it look like if we fixed it. Then we make a sort of a map that says, well, today we're over here, but what we need to do is move over here. And then our 4th picture is a timeline that simply shows us in what sequence, 1, 2, 3, 4, are we going to make this move from here to here, therefore fixing these numbers to make life better for those people or that thing. Those 4 little pictures tell an entire story. They're easy to make, and you can pitch anything.
Right. Great advice. To close our conversation, you always advocate that presentation skills are a critical business skill.
Yeah.
Why? And how can we get better at it?
I'm not even going to draw on this one. This one requires a little bit of arm waving. Let's put it this way. So over the years, I've gone from being this management consultant who drew to writing some books. The books happily have been a success, which means that people then ask me to come in to their business, do some kind of training, how could people be more visual, etc. So what I've come to realize is I'm on stage probably half my working time, which isn't something I had ever expected to do. And we all get stage fright. We can get very anxious about, oh my gosh, this presentation is really important. During the last 10 years of giving 750 presentations in 4 continents and to tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people, I've learned a couple of things. And the number one takeaway from me is that, frankly, in terms of our own personal and professional success, there's really nothing more important for us than our ability to share our idea in public. We've got to be able to present. And yet, statistics show, data tell us that the biggest fear that most people have is the fear of getting up and presenting. So here's why success is so hard. Because the one thing that we need to be able to do really well is the one thing that most of us are afraid to even try. So, 3 very simple rules that work for me in how to be a great presenter. Tell the truth. Rule number 1, just tell the truth. Rule number 2, tell that truth with a story. Don't list a bunch of facts. Tell it with a story. And then truth number 3 is tell that story with a picture. And if you just do those 3, tell the truth with a story, and tell that story with a picture, you will be yourself, you will be comfortable, your audience will believe in you, and your idea will come together. Your presentation will be amazing. That's all that's needed.
Dan, one of the questions I always ask also the people that I interview is, what is your big why for the work you do?
Why? Well, because it's the same thing we've been talking about all along. The why, I want people to understand each other. And I'm going to just go into a little tangent for a moment. I've been working on a project for a big company on helping them improve some of their training material. Excellent material, excellent ideas that they want to train. So let's take that as kind of case number one. Case number two, I'm taking motorcycle training myself. So I'm both an educator, I'm putting together training for people in a very complex business environment, and I'm a student. I'm learning from another teacher. And what I'm realizing in both cases is I don't think we do education very well. I don't think that we really understand that the purpose of education is to make sure that I get it. And what I'm seeing is there's so much other stuff that's thrown in, so much checking of boxes. Have I covered the 6 main topics? But I didn't understand any of them. The why, Eric, is I really, really want to know that I understand it. And to me, opening up the visual mind is the greatest way to do that.
And then with that insight, thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and thank you for all your answers. And thank you for the great work that you're doing with your books, sharing your ideas, and hope to see you next time.
Eric, my pleasure. Thank you.